up now, and you should be live. Yep, you're live.
All right, I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled Board of Finance meeting for Wednesday, July 13th, 2022, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we're now to public comment. Anybody for public comment?
I'm sorry.
Public comment?
Yeah,
No, I
real
don't see
quick.
anybody signed up.
Oh, I didn't sign up. Do I need to sign
Yeah,
up?
no, Terry, state your name, address.
Harry Shaker, 87 Long Meadow Hill Road. I think that as far as the first thing, I'll be very brief. I found out as far as the, I have kind of been opposed to the sewer going across over to where the crab basket is and whatever. But I talked to Nelson, and I was not aware that there were limitations on these pumps that were going to be going in each property. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a whole different ballgame for me. Knowing, because my biggest concern was what could possibly happen once we put sewer there if someone were to buy multiple properties or whatever. So as far as I'm concerned, it really put me much more at ease. My second thing is, I spent 14 years on the Board of Education. There were times when we probably went through one of the hardest times Brookville ever went through with a former selectman and business director. And I want people to know that not once did I ever go into a meeting or go on a phone call without first talking to the people and getting to the facts. Whether they told me the truth or whether they didn't tell me the truth, but at least when I went to the meetings, I had facts in front of me that were given to me. And as a former Board of Ed member and as a current selectman, I would encourage people that when you come to meetings to speak or you're going to email, to please get the facts. And don't come and mislead people with information. Don't criminalize people saying they're breaking the law when you haven't even talked to them. And I will make reference to comments made to me. Not one person has ever approached me and asked my opinion on what's happened with the Board of Finance, or with the chairman of the Board of Finance, or with me, or with the previous administration. So I would really highly suggest, before you embarrass yourself, and before you embarrass the party that you're with, please come informed. And if you have enough professionalism, go to the people that you're having an issue with and speak to them. Whether you like it or whether you don't like it, whether you like them or you don't like them. But please come informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Anybody else for public comment?
You have public comment later on the agenda too, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, wait for that.
Yes, sir. All right, go on, Brianna.
We had communication and correspondence from Tara Carr, Mark Ferry, Howard Lasser, Matt Grimes, Mark Delanda, and Andrew Ellis.
Thank you. Next.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings of June 2nd and June 8th.
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda now to move the fire department up to the next presentation. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Andy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah's going to hook up a quick presentation.
We have
It's
something to hook up
very, very,
for.
very
It's always-
brief.
This is always the game.
While we're hooking this up, just want to have it.
Sorry.
We're here tonight. We wanted to do kind of an end-of-the-year review of our financial situation with the ambulance and the fire department, so you guys know where
Letting us go through this morning.
about our funding, and kind of give you a halfway year review of our calls for service and the massive increase that we're seeing again. So we just kind of want to keep you all, I promise you, I'll keep you in the loop as things are going and escalating. With me tonight is our Deputy Chief VMS, Wayne Woodkey, paramedic, and our Captain of VMS, Fraser Weir, another staff paramedic. These guys are part of our administrative team. Sarah's working on getting that connected up. One of the things I wanted to discuss tonight while she's working on this, we had not an issue, but a question on our contingency. Years ago, we took all of our contingency funds out. You guys, we worked with you guys probably 5-6 years ago, I think. It was under Mr. Dunn. For things like storms or unforeseen, prolonged incidents that aren't funded by FEMA or something like that. We had a gentleman drown on Candlewood Lake on Memorial Day weekend, and it became costly to us to the point of, about $3,500 for us, and probably about $300 for Candlewood. For unbudgeted stuff, and especially at the end of the year. There was some question on the process. You guys gave us your word. You said, hey, look, we're going to take your contingency out. If you need it, come to us. And you guys have been great to this. A couple times we've come to you with mechanical failures in particular, and things have been paid, and it's been really good. I did get some pushback from the first selectman. I don't think she understood kind of the process. She questioned it. There was some, I don't think we need to pay this. Well, just so we're all on the same page, you guys did remove our contingencies years ago, right? To have one town contingency, correct?
We did, yes.
Okay, all right, so that's an accurate statement?
Actually, the Board of Selectmen did.
The Board of Selectmen did, yeah.
And we went along.
You went along with it, yes,
Yes.
correct, okay, and we've come to you before, all right, I just wanted to make sure that we all understand the process, because there was some questions. Marcia was really good, she straightened a lot of stuff out and helped us, and once Tara saw everything and talked to everybody, it kind of got clear, but I just wanted to go on record to be sure that we were all on the same page still. So next year at budget time, I don't have to put a contingency in for when unforeseen. I can't look over my shoulder when these incidents are escalating and dollars are racking up, and I can't say, I don't know if we have money for that. So I know if I have your guys' support, which I always seem to have, okay, we're good.
And just,
But yeah.
we had posted it to emergency operations, and I think I'm going to change it so that it goes to the actual fire departments, just so when we're doing comparisons year over year, we see fire department, we don't have to say, what was this, and have to look that back up. So when we do pay money out, assuming that everyone agrees that that's where we should post it, we'll have to ask for a transfer, so you'll see it at that point.
Cool.
Andy, you're in the same boat as the Board of Ed, and Bob can talk to that as well. When we come up to it, is we as a group prior to tried to get the contingencies out of each of the areas to get the taxes down so we could work with the town and keep the mill rate down low as possible. Also saying though, when you took, we assumed the risk, you took the risk out of you guys and we assumed the risk in the bigger pool of things, which allowed us to cover more risks.
And as you'll see, we absorb a lot of stuff. There's just certain things I can't absorb, operationally. So I appreciate that. And you guys have been really good. We've come to you several times for different things in the last 5 or 6 years since we've done this. And it's been no question, and that's awesome.
But we need to follow the process, go through the Board of Selectmen
Correct.
before it can come to us.
Correct. And it did. It went right to the Board of Selectmen. It's just
Okay.
that's where it kind of got held up, and there was questions. And I just want to make sure that we're all, I had the conversation with Tara. I think we're all set, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So
Thank you.
thank you. All right. So we have a review for our budget. Oh, what do you have, the incidents, or you start with the?
Incidents are first.
Okay, so we have our incidents first. I'll talk about that, and Sarah and Wayne can talk about the other things. This is us in Milford High School, last week. Thank God we're not in the Milford. That was a disaster. All right, so last time we came and saw you in March. We had our meeting. We were 130 calls over for the fire department and 290 calls over for the ambulance. That was back only in March. As of July 1st, we're 353 calls on the fire department side, which is a 43% increase over last year. And the ambulance is 383 more calls. It's a 46% increase. And because of the hard work of our staff and your backing with the extra staffing that we got, we've only had 3 times in the first 6 months of the year out of 1,200 calls that we had to call somebody else. So that means people got the ambulance to them in less than 5 minutes every time. So we are seeing a drastic increase. We're predicting probably close to 2,500 calls, 24.
At least 2,400 is my prediction, and with the way volume has been happening, the way number ones have been coming in, 1, 2, 3, we're expecting around 24, 44, I believe was my actual math figure.
So it's not slowing down. It wasn't just a goof last year. So I told you we'd keep you informed. The move that you guys made, and we worked hard with Tara and Marcia with this, and increasing our paramedic staffing is paying off in dividends. We're going to explain to that in a minute once we get to the money side of things.
Is there, can you identify 1 or 2 root causes, or is it just kind of general across the board
Growth of the
increases?
town.
Well,
Growth of the town.
I realize that,
Yeah,
but
that's
is it-
There's not
more people, There's more,
It's
the
across the board,
apartments,
all
we're
types.
going to the apartments a lot more.
Okay.
You know, any multifamily dwellings and commercial establishments are where we're doing most of our calls.
Okay.
You know, it used to be, we were going to people's homes and we were doing 500 calls a year or something
Yeah.
like that. It's just,
But it's not the increases in all for elderly or all for the late, it's just.
it's every, it's car
across the board.
accidents.
Okay.
We've been on the lake a ton,
Yeah.
you know, this year, there's been a lot going on, okay.
Falls are our major.
Yeah,
our
gravity
major-
kind
Gravity in
of-
Brookfield's a lot
Yeah.
higher.
Okay. So Sarah's gonna go over some of the financial stuff, and we'll discuss some operational things real quick, and then we'll be out here for you. Just wanna keep you guys.
So what we did, wow, those numbers don't come out that, they're really nice. But we went through in our fire side, we sat down and had some conversations with Marcia, which we got everything to work out the way that we wanted it to work out. So we zeroed out our budget, which was the 354, 945, including $12,000 in revenue. And then on the other side, we did collect an additional $10,000 in our billing, which we used to offset everything that we did. But we put in another $79,000 to keep the fire service afloat in Brookfield. So that came out of our coffers, so that you can just see the breakdown there based upon what we come and ask for money for. Some things include our training, you'll see in a later slide. A number of additional classes based upon OSHA. Our operations expense, and a lot of that is the emergency management and rehab and such that has been zeroed out over the years. Building and grounds, utilities, including fuel expense, and office and administrations of just a lot of our office supplies. And again, we did have an OSHA visit, so some of that is in that. So it was almost $425,000 to run the fire service.
And the town provided 355, basically. So the generous people of Brookfield with their donations and our fundraisers offset the rest. So if they were not generous and we did not do that, that would be other town expense.
On the EMS side, so we predicted, I believe it was, I don't remember what our number was, but our 629 was with our billing revenue and the service fee in there. We did collect almost $103,000 more, which helped to offset our additional personnel. We did bring on another paramedic, and I'll let the chief talk about that in a minute. But again, $1.2 million, and again, we put in another almost $60,000 on our side, on that side of the budget.
That
So-
staffing increase, we increased in September, EMT at night.
The EMT at night was September.
We went 24/7 with one ambulance in September, and we didn't have to come back to you guys. We were watching the calls trending up, and our billing revenue came up, and we felt confident that we could cover it. And we knew that the fire company would cover it. We did about $60,000 to cover the ambulance, but we didn't have to come back here, and we increased our staffing, which was tremendous. Which is a really it's a testament to the guys that are doing the paperwork, because it's all the revenue is dependent on good paperwork. And these two guys here in particular are very diligent in making sure that happens. So our collection rates have increased, which allowed us to increase our staffing at no cost to us.
So just a quick breakdown of what we spent the money on. So our training, we had an in-house safety officer class, so we had 14 people that are now incident safety officers. We had 4 firemen go off and become fire officers, as well as our Fire 1 and Fire 2 program that we run every year. In terms of our operation, cell phone and iPad services, which were not included in the regular budget, so we needed that because all of our equipment has iPads now. Again, our emergency management, rehab, operation technologies, diesel fuel and vehicle supplies. We had some buildings, security and our fire alarm needed to be upgraded, and then additional cable and heating expenses in our utilities. On the EMS side, so in addition to staffing and ambulance 24/7, we now have 2 dedicated paramedics 24 hours a day, plus a 3rd paramedic for 12 hours, right?
Do you want to talk about
For
that?
10 hours.
10 hours.
So in our original budget proposal, we were asking for monies to staff a 3rd paramedic during the day, because unfortunately the volume, there's no real rhyme or reason as to what happens in Brookfield when the call volume comes in. And realizing that there has to be some give and take throughout the entire process, and we know this is a really tough budget year, and we appreciate all the hard work that you put forward for it. But we were able to work it out to still, instead of 7 days a week of a staffed paramedic all the time, we ended up having to cut it down to 40 hours. So we had to pretty much kind of figure out and guess what 40 hours out of the week was going to be most beneficial for our community. And with that, we landed on our best option, our best approach to that was to actually take that 40 hours and stretch it out to 70 hours by making that paramedic on call. So in times of when one ambulance goes out of town for mutual aid or goes on a difficult call, in terms of cardiac arrest, major traumas, they're tied up at the hospital for a while. So we can bring that on-call paramedic in to help staff another ambulance. So that really is going to be, hopefully it's going to be a great cost-saving measure for not only us as a department, but you as a town and our community, so that we're trying to make that dollar stretch
Yeah,
even
we
more.
stretched the dollar for sure. It was great teamwork by everybody to get the money, and then we said, you know what, we can do something, we can build a better mousetrap, and we, instead of having somebody there all the time who may not be needed, we did that, and it's working out already. It's paying off in dividends for us.
Was that a model that you adopted from other towns, or did you do that?
We kind of
Brookfield Way.
built the Brookfield Way, we call it. We kind of, you know, it was. There's some people do different. We have one at night that's on call, and we kind of, you know, Wayne came up to me and said, "What about this?" He had the light bulb came on, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a great idea." So it stretched the dollar, and then you know, Marcia and Tara's tough budget approach with us, and make us look at everything, got us down to 40 hours, which we agreed on. We said, "Let's do this," and then they helped us, you know, see the light, and then work on making it better. So it was a good, a big help.
It's a good compromise.
One thing that I think that we should just bring up, I'm 99% sure of the response, and I told them that when we give them, let's say we give them $500,000, we do divide it up in our budget just to help us, what is this money for? And to me, I said that spend the whole $500,000. If you're under budget here and over budget there, we don't care. It's like the Board of Ed that we want you to spend our money first, and we're not going to say give us that money back because you were different on the budgeted. That I think that we're putting that detail in. I added that detail just to help us understand that. So if you have something different other than spending all of our money first based on the bottom line, we should talk about that now.
Yeah, as you can see, you guys don't fully fund us. You know, we subsidize it, and it works out really well. And Marcia and our budget team have had really good conversations, and I think everything's really tight. We just wanted to show you guys, you know, that was a full year, and that's what the fire company put in to offset the cost of the roofs, you know, to save it off the taxpayers, and they worked really hard at it. We are increasing, as you can see, the calls are increasing. The reason we put that in there is when we come here next year, I think we're good for hours for our staff. We might not be. If we do 2,800 calls and we have some issues, we might have to add things. I just need it on the radar for you guys. I don't want to ever surprise you. I promise you I'd give you reports every 6 months or so. So here's your report. You guys have anything else for us? Sarah, you got anything? Something?
Well, there's just what else we spend our money on which is a lot of the same.
It is in our capital plan. We do next year. That project to do our addition at the Center Fire Station is a must. We need to expand to get another ambulance and to properly have a place for the people to live. So that's definitely gonna be on the front burner when we come talk to you guys next year. Okay.
Comments from anybody?
Just as a point, if I could just quickly mention that $11.99 for the calls that we've done so far as of July 1st, it's actually $12.88 as of today. It's growing and growing.
And that's
growing.
13 days,
Yeah.
12 days.
13
I
days.
think the approach is still got to be work together,
Yes.
communicate, and find compromise.
Correct. And I
that
think
works,
the
and
on-call.
provide service to the taxpayers.
Correct. I think the on-call thing is a huge compromise. I think it's gonna, it's a wave of the future for some stuff. It's gonna make the dollar stretch, which, you know, we wanna do, and obviously that's important to us, to all of us. We all live here, we all pay taxes here, except for you, Fraser. I mean,
I will eventually.
I know you will eventually.
Th-
All right, I appreciate your time.
Thank you for all you
Thanks,
do
guys.
the
All right,
town.
Thank you for your
Thank
support,
you.
all right?
Yes.
And Marcia, I really appreciate what you helped do for our financial situation to help us be able to make these reports, and you've been a huge help, so.
Thank
All
you.
you have, thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
My
Be safe.
70th year of being in EMS, I've never had a better flowing budget
Yes.
year, so thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Really?
All right.
Nice, yes.
I'd like to make an amendment to our agenda to move up the WPCA to next. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, WPCA, please.
Hi, I'm Allison Kennedy. I'm the project coordinator of the WPCA. And I had submitted some email versions of documentation that we were going to talk about tonight, and I have hard copies for you guys. So we're here to discuss a project that you're all really familiar with, been in front of you a few times. And some things about the project have stayed the same, and there's some new information that we hope you'll consider. Obviously, it's a sewer extension that will service 9 properties, including the craft center. The route of the extension has already been agreed to by Connecticut DOT. And this project would eliminate the use of failing septic systems in the area and prevent contamination of groundwater, drinking water wells, and pollution to the Still River. Both Doc Sullivan and Paul Avery are in favor of this project. It's been for a really long time. And we've gotten multiple letters from them encouraging us to move forward with the project as a matter of environment, health, and safety. I've recently spoken to the property owners in the area. They're also in favor of the project because they're having to make continuous costly repairs to septic systems that in a lot of cases cannot be replaced with code compliant systems because of the soils in the area. They just can't get into the ground what they need to get into the ground to prevent the contamination and the pollution into the area. The new information that we're coming to with, specifically this 2022 STEEP grant that we're working on. This is an amount of $30 million, and the top amount for the award that each town can get is $500,000. We think that this is a really strong application. We think it addresses all of the things that the STEEP grant is trying to accomplish. If for any reason the funding comes in at a partial amount and not for the full $500,000, we're not obligated to accept it. And some of the stipulations of this grant money are that it can only be used for capital projects. It cannot be used for engineering, planning, design. The good news is that the WPCA has already spent about $58,000 of its own money on the design phase of this project. And our project is shovel ready and ready to go, which is another stipulation of the grant. When you submit the application, the project has to be completely shovel ready, meaning permits, engineering, everything ready to go. The WPCA actually plans to put this project out to bid at the end of July before we even submit the bid application because we have everything lined up. To the best of our knowledge, after consulting with the town, we don't believe there's any other projects on the 10-year capital plan or even in the Arpa requests that qualify for this grant and are shovel ready. So this is the town's only shot at this money from the STEEP grant. We're already in the process of we either have or we're in the process of getting all the state and local permits, some of which are included in the documentation I gave you, the opinion letter from the Inland Wetlands Commission, the 820 for a referral from planning. Our engineer is working on the permit needed for DOT, so we're all queued up and ready to go. And the application is due by August 15th. So this is pretty much an informational discussion with you guys right now. We do still have some discussions to do with the Board of Selectmen as well, but we wanted to answer all your questions and provide you with the information that we have. Another piece, some more pieces of new information concern the concerns that some had over development of the area due to the sewer being in that area, and we've addressed those concerns as requested by the Board of Selectmen at their last meeting. They asked about the capacity of the system that we're putting in. And this system that we're putting in is a combination of small pump stations and gravity lines, and it's not an unlimited system. It was designed specifically to handle the flows of the properties as they stand right now. And right now, we're estimating about all properties combined, maybe 1,000 gallons per day, which is why it also would not be a problem with the moratorium that's in place right now with the WPCA. At the Board of Selectmen, they asked if we could get something in writing from our engineer stating that this system can't handle unlimited capacity, and we did, which we included a memo from Langen Engineering and the documentation we gave to you explaining more about the construction of the system and what it can handle. We also visited the Historic Commission because one of their goals is to initiate a second historic district in the town of Brookfield, which would be in this exact area, the Iron Works area, which would include a lot of the properties. I think 6 out of the 9 properties that are on this plan would be included in that historic district. And they're very much in favor of this project. We were with them, and actually the chair of that board was going to be with us tonight to speak in favor of this, and she had another commitment. She did say that she would be happy to provide a letter of support, which hopefully we'll have for you at your next meeting. But as you know, if these properties were part of the historic district, that would also limit what could be done to these structures. And the final piece of information, I consulted with our zoning commission about if there was anything in our current zoning regulations that would prohibit overdevelopment of this area. And they helped me find the section of the zoning regs, which I'll tell you right now when I find that document here. It is section C14, where it discusses, Article 3, section C14, where it discusses the amount of land needed in order to put in multifamily dwellings in a project site. And in the Gateway North District, you would need 4 acres, and in the TCD, you would need 5. And I've also put all the acreage of the properties in question, and as you can see, even if they were combined, the properties that are next to each other wouldn't have 4 or 5 acres. So there really is no risk of zoning approving any type of multifamily dwellings on these properties with or without the historic district and with or without our limited capacity system. So hopefully that will address some of those concerns. And then we have with us today Greg Dembowski and Paul Avery and Nelson Malwitz, who are all going to contribute to the discussion a little bit, and then we'll hope to answer some of your questions. Right?
That was really good.
I tried to keep it short and sweet.
All I could do was add a little bit of perspective on the history of Steepman Brookfield and how we got to this project. Allison's been working on this as the lead now for the past month or month and a half, a ton of work. If you'd like, I can spend maybe just a few minutes giving the perspective of Steep and how we got to this point. She kind of hit the highlights, but I could dig in a little more detail if you'd like. If not, we can move further down the agenda to Paul and Nelson. Would you like a little more detail, or are you good? Please. Okay. So Steep, the town has submitted 4 Steep grants since I've been involved in the economic development world, either as a commissioner or as an employee of the town. We've received 3 of those 4 Steep grants. 2 were for Streetscape Phase 1. One was a denial for $500,000. We don't always get awards when you write an application. And the third, you may recall, was for the Town Hall Land Use Office Renovation Project. That was a Steep grant. That grant was specific in that it was limited to $128,500, and it said in the grant application guidelines, COVID-related projects will be a high priority. That's why we picked that project. What's different about this application is similar to the way Steep used to be, and that is it's a $500,000 max, it's got to be shovel-ready, and you really have to show you've spent engineering effort and other resources to be really ready for this project. In my opinion, this is an extremely strong application. I think it is as good as any application we've submitted, and I commend Allison for the ton of work she's done with various boards and commissions over the past month and a half or so. Nelson talked to Francis Pickering, the Westcog Executive Director, I think yesterday, about this application. How strong is it? His suggestions. Allison talked about the boards and commissions he's been to, but you are never guaranteed an award. It's a $30 million grant. If 60 towns submit a $500,000 application, the 61st town is not going to get anything. It's a $30 million limit. So it's competitive. You've got to show a strong application, and I think this is a strong application. How did we get to this project? When this steep application solicitation first came out, word travels fast when the state is offering $30 million of money. So every steep eligible town, and we are one of those, the word got around, here's the application, read about it, and towns are encouraged to submit. When that application first came out, well before Allison and Nelson ever got engaged, I sent an email to Tara, or maybe a phone call, and I think Marcia. I said, what do you want to do? You want to go, you want to try for this one? Do you want to let it pass? What do you suggest? Steep applications don't come out every year. It's whenever the governor's office or an agency decides to fund a particular thing. In this case, steep was announced. We read the guidelines. I went ahead and asked Marcia to send to me, a review with me, the 10-year capital program list, project list. I won't call it a capital plan, it's more of a list. I also said, can you please share with me the ARPA unfunded projects from what the ARPA task force recommended that didn't get funded. We looked at all of those projects and we screened them against the steep guidelines. Some were shovel ready, some were just engineering and study. These will never get funded for that. After sifting through those filters, we, and I think Tara was a big part of this, came to the conclusion that this project is the best one, the most likely one, the most ready one, the most eligible one, the most likely one to be funded. Then it was, okay, who's going to write the application? I simply don't have the time. It's a huge effort to write a steep application, especially one as complex as this, and I don't have to tell these two about that. You all know very much. We're overwhelmed down in land use, and I said to Tara, I'd love to do it, but I can't commit to it. She talked to Nelson, I believe. Allison was tapped on the shoulder, and for the past month and a half or so, it's been a big effort, and this is where we are today. So that's the history of STEEP, how we got to this project. I'll answer any questions, or we'll move on to the agenda.
I think we're good. Move on, please. Thank you.
So, I'm Paul Avery, I'm the sanitary for the town. I met some of you on the way in. I've been here since 2008, and I got to know 3 of these properties very well because of the problems there associated with the septic systems. Allison talked a little bit about the environmental situation, and you know, it's anecdotal. I don't have any laboratory evidence of contamination of the river or anything like that. But the soils around the Still River bed are what we call bank run gravel in my business. So it's a sandy beach. They spill water into it and it goes right down, and you know that it travels quickly to the ultimate body of water at the bottom of the Still River. So you don't get good renovation in soils like that. The septic systems work well because everything's just flowing through. So the concern is you're not getting good renovation, and the biggest concern is the industry up at Tux Road that has a failed septic system since before I got here in 2008. And what they do is they pump their 3,000-gallon tank out every few months, sometimes once a month during the busy part of their year, and then usually every 3 to 6 months during the winter. So that's not a good situation, and we want to fix that septic system since I got here, but we cannot because there's contamination in the soil up there. So there's been groundwater monitoring going on for past mercury contamination of the soil up there. According to A.J. Tuck, it wasn't their contamination, it was prior to them. I don't know any of that. I just know that we can't build a septic system in soils that under RECRA rules is being monitored for groundwater contamination. So we have never built the septic system, and we have a 3,000-gallon tank that we pump out on a regular basis. So it's close to my heart to get that problem fixed for all the years that I've been with the town. At the Brookfield Market, you have a grocery and a market. When I came to the town, it was really operating as a market with very little food service in it. I didn't see too much concern at that time, but then another fella came in and opened up more of a deli market, and I had to work very closely with him to limit how much food he could serve out of there because of the concerns. Once you start cooking and preparing food, you're getting rid of a lot more water. He's got a 500-gallon tank that, I don't know how old it is, a couple of dry wells. It's not much of a septic system at all. I know for a fact right now he pumps out his grease trap and his septic tank every 3 months, and I know the fellow who pumps it. That kind of stuff is really kind of unacceptable from the perspective of the Department of Public Health. They do not want frequent pumping of septic tanks as a means of controlling septic, deposition into the soils. They seek permanent solutions. The last property is One Tux Road, which is a boarding house. It's got bedrooms in it with a shared kitchen for all the tenants. I think there's 8 bedrooms in there and a retail store. He experiences backups that cause him to need a guy to come in and pump him out more frequently than he should. He's the only septic system of the 3 that I'm talking about right now that I could actually fix. We could permit and do a repair there, but he has 2 drinking water wells on site that limit the area we have to put the leaching system in. Also, his tenants are variable, right? There may be 8 to 20 people sleeping, living there, then, the tenants come and go. So you lose a little bit of control on guessing how much wastewater he's gonna come out with. He's got a 1,000-gallon tank, probably should be at least a 1,500 or 2,000-gallon tank. So those 3 properties alone, 12 Tux, the industry itself up there, the Brookfield Market, and One Tux Road are the biggest concerns for me. But getting back to what Allison said, when you're depositing all this sewage into these sandy soils right at the perimeter of the river, it's not a good situation. You're probably not getting the kind of renovation, the effluent that you want. That's going on at most of your homes. If you guys have septic systems and you have loamy soils around the septic system, most of the renovation occurs right around the leaching system itself. Water goes back to the wells and it's clean. If you don't have that, you're diluting the sewage through the river, and it's not a good situation. And as I said, at Brookfield Market and at Tux, it is impossible to fix their septic systems. There's no room to put a new one. I've even soil tested under the lot at the Brookfield Market just to see if we could do anything, and we hit high lead rock. So, it's incompatible with regulations to even stick a leaching system on this parking lot. So there really is no solution for for 2 of the locations in terms of septic. One Tux Road, we could solve the situation there. As far as the other properties, I don't know as much about them. I don't think the Brookfield Craft Center generates that much effluent. It's a visitation kind of place, a workshop. People come and go. I don't think there's a lot of water use. But again, they don't have a lot of room to repair if they did have a failure. There's very little room on these lots. Grass, you just need some open space to put a leaching field in. As far as the other properties, which I think are 281 or 2, I don't know much about them at all. They are depositing the effluent into the sandy soils around the river. I think 2 of them still have wells. There's wells at One Tux Road. It's a good thing we got the Brookfield Market of water supply, so he does not have a well anymore. He did have bacterial contamination in his water that I knew of 10 years ago, but we got a water line to him from the market. So that's pretty much the picture of the situation out there. I don't think there's anybody in this room wants to see the area sewered more than I. I've spent a lot of time working with at least 3 of the property owners over there to try and make sure that they're getting their tanks pumped out frequently.
Brings us to Nelson.
Just briefly, we probably about our 6th iteration of design in order to get the cost down. That doesn't include the designs that were done, attempted in 1996. It failed because it wasn't enough money in the properties to be able to sponsor that. The properties by state regulation are limited to roughly 10% of the grand list value, what they can contribute to a septic system. It can't be any more. then the increase in value of the property as a result of putting house sewers in. And then we tried again in 2015 and looked real hard at it once again. That was under my tenure, and again it failed because of lack of funds. And we tried again in 2021 and with the Arpa possibility, but that didn't come through. So now we have STEEP, small town economic assistance program, and so this is like money from outside of Brookfield to come in, and which would be really great. And then and in our 6 iterations, we've cost reduced it. We've combined properties to a single pump. There'll be some easement issues that are all solvable, but because everybody wants to play, I don't think anybody's going to say no. So so they just have to be worked through, and there's some surveying and recording and legal work, that sort of thing. So then the other thing with the design, Allison pointed out that it's limited to these properties, so you can't put a big structure in of some sort, and the pumps aren't big enough to handle additional capacity, and you have to design them in such a way that they pump frequently enough to clear out the waste and not too and so they can't be just sitting there, and then not too frequently either. So they're all carefully sized for that reason, with those considerations. And then okay, how does the budget shape out? Now this is more of a sort of a steep eye view of the budget, because there's a table and then there's this graph. In the top, the project expenses, the blue area is the design that was already been done, plus additional to get the bid out, which estimate the total of about $82,000. And now, so far, the WPCA has floated that. And then the construction estimate is $685,000 after all the connections and the pumps and everything's put into place. Then during the construction, there's inspection and construction engineering that has to be done in the field. That's typical of all projects. Then there's the legal easements, $25,000 estimated at $5,000 per owner. And then because it may be that the project might, hopefully if we go this year actually, but it could, if it doesn't go next year, we put in a 5% inflation contingency because things are steep and you never know. So that's in there. So the total project in round numbers then is $900,000. And where would the money come from? Well, the STEEP grant is $500,000. So we'd be asking for the whole amount that we're eligible for as a town. And then the assessments by the properties would be $253,000, which is 10% of the grand list value of those properties. And according to Francis Pickering of Westcott, that can be included in the town contribution for the matching funds, because internally how the funds flow is not really a matter for STEEP. If this comes from WPCA, then it's town monies, as it were. And then, so the match from the remaining is $147,000. And so, I mean, our ask is to have the town pick that up, but it could be anywhere from a match between the WPCA at 0% or the town at 0%, and the rest balanced by the other party. So we don't have to decide that now. We just are committing that eventually that will come up with somewhere between, that the town will pay somewhere between 0 and 100% of that $147,000. And so the WPCA can fill in if need be, but my argument is just a gut argument that because this area of the town, it's historic. In fact, we learned from the historical, that the commission there that there used to be this scissor factory down there at at the end of Tux Road, I guess, and it held 300 people, and it was the biggest scissor. That was all Brookfield did. It was known for its scissor making, and on the town logo, there's this middle logo. There's this looks like two swords, but it's not. It's a scissor. and so there we are. So anyway, it's part of the historical thing. So as we thought, it should be in the historical district and also be a barrier for future development because it has to stay historical. But anyway, that's our ask. And the other part of the ask is that we no longer, we no longer do bands, so we'll need a allowance of $900,000 for whatever vehicle would replace the band in order to float the project as a construction loan, and then it would be paid back either by Steve or by, if the grant is awarded, and then by the benefit assessments, and then by whatever match we agree to at a later date. So that would be our asks at this point.
We should have the cash flow to front the $900,000. That's part of what our fund balance is used for. We would get back the $500,000. We would decide what to do with the $147,000, and then the $253,000 we would continue to be fronting for, just like we do with the water assessments, until they pay that back. So if it's on a 20-year, we're fronting $253,000.
Or you could bond it if you want.
Or we could bond it, we could front it by bonding, or we could front it with cash.
But we can't use ARPA money,
But we can't use ARPA.
according to the stipulations of the grant. So we cannot use ARPA money for the match.
The only other possibility or factor, let's say, I haven't mentioned is that the Brookfield Craft Center is asking that the town help out with their portion, which would be maybe ARPA funds for the sponsor for the arts, for them, in order to be able to help them out. So I just want to put that on the table, but that's really for a later discussion.
So where are you with Board of Selectmen?
Well, at the last meeting, Steve was out sick, so they wanted all three of them to be there. There was some concern that you could combine properties and still put 830G or some kind of a set of housing in there, but it turns out, according to the zoning regulations, that's not possible, and according to the design, we're not really designing for any big thing happening. There's gonna be a pipe under the road on the bridge, over the bridge at Route 25, that'll be heated and insulated for cold days, really cold days, and that's all included in the design, but it's only a 2-week pipe, so it's not gonna be flow. And so those are all the considerations in the whole thing. And that is, we had DOT come in, and we didn't say this is how we want to cross the bridge. We asked them, how do you think we should cross the bridge? And that was their solution. So it was their idea. And it's always better to have them implement their idea.
Yeah, because they didn't have a full board, Tara said she just didn't feel comfortable without voting, without everybody there. And they did ask for that documentation from our engineer about the capacity of the system. That was really the only thing they asked us to follow up with. Unfortunately for us, the grant application is due August 15th. So when the Board of Selectmen meeting and the Board of Finance meeting happen in August, we're gonna be like running from these meetings to go submit an application. So we just wanted to try to cross all our T's and dot all our I's and make sure that if there was any other information you guys wanted from us, that we'd have time to provide it. So hopefully we can get quick decisions at the beginning of August.
But we definitely need Board of Selectmen assent for the project, for the steep application has to, so yeah.
The Board of Selectmen have to define where the money's coming from, how it's gonna come from, before we can even talk about it. We really can't, and that's been expressively expressed to us in many different ways, that the Board of Selectmen is the ruling party of this town. So we can't even address it really, or talk about it, without them bringing it to us and bringing it to the point of where they're getting the funding, how they're gonna fund it, what percentages are gonna come across, how do they perceive the buildup of your numbers, then we would review it to to review it before then, to even comment on it would cause us issues at this time.
Well, we have the, you can see our situation, we're up against a deadline, so.
We understand that, and
Okay, now you're informed, and
Yep.
hopefully, when's your July, August meeting?
August 10th.
Okay.
And we could,
We're probably diving
Plenty
into
of time,
our
plenty of
calendars.
time.
Yeah,
there's,
5 days, that's.
5 days.
Plenty of time.
there's vacations, but there's special meeting, there's a potential for special meeting, I wouldn't be opposed to that. So,
But the Board of
but the
Selectmen-
Board of Selectmen, they have to do their work first.
Sure.
They have to do their work and
Well,
present
they
us with a
might
full
do a
plan.
special meeting too, so, yeah, we'll have to work on that. Okay, well, that's a status, that's a snapshot, and we've done the best we could against the
Thank you.
deadlines. But it's $500,000 to Brookfield that we're working to.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to make another amendment to our agenda and move the DOE, oh no, he is up there, never mind, Bob's first. I apologize. We don't have the report of the first selectman, she's not here, so Bob, please.
Hi, everyone. Did anybody not get what I sent out this afternoon? I brought copies,
Thanks, everybody.
just in case.
Right, I saw it.
Okay. So there's copies here in case you need them. We do this every month. I give you an update of where we are on finances on the Board of Ed. And before I jump into the specifics of today, I just want to kind of go back to what was said in one of the earlier ones. You all held all the contingency, and if you remember, there were 3 big risks that we've always talked about. One was special ed outplacement, the second was COVID related, and the third was the staffing, this big negative budget we have on staffing savings. 2 of those 3 this year have actually come in over budget. We've spent $95,000 on COVID and this year, and we've spent $73,000 more than we had budgeted on special education replacement. They're on the bottom of that sheet that I had sent out, so you have one. That said, we have not asked for any contingency fund release up to now, because as you remember, we were working really hard to make the budget, even with those things in it, by putting a big freeze. It's part of our partnership that we needed to take the actions on the Board of Education that we could take to try and cover the costs, and only if we really needed it would we come back. And we weren't going to do anything that would harm the schools, and we've had that discussion the last couple of months, and we felt we could actually try to manage it. In fact, I gave you guys the signals last month that I thought we might land okay. Well, we're in the middle of closing the books right now. It is the 13th of July, but the closing process does go on all the way through the month of July and sometimes into August as the final bills come in for the fiscal year. But Mr. Post gave us an update on where he is, and he's had some surprises that have come in. So it does not look at this moment like we're able to come in on the budget, including those 2 big exposures that have been sitting out there, sadly. The sheet I had sent you all are kind of a recap of where were we last month and where are we this month. And you can see the better or worse. We've had some surprises come in on salary lines. Now, I'll tell you, that's a big concern for us because salary has been, Ken has hit that dead nuts on his forecast for like 5 years in a row as you come into the last phase. So these are big numbers, and if you add them all up, they're almost $200,000 that have shown up in the last payrolls that we didn't anticipate. And that's the biggest single issue that we're doing. And what Ken is doing right now is he's going through person by person by person to understand what was different from his forecast.
So is that $200,000, that's not $200,000 that showed up in the last payroll, it's $200,000 that showed up in the reconciliation over a period of time? It wasn't
No, it's $200,000 from last month's forecast to this month's
Right,
forecast.
so
So
forecast.
so the surprise factor is showing
the
up.
surprise
in the last
factor, but
pay-
it's not like there was $200,000 of expense in
No,
June.
I don't think it's some big expense. And in fact, if you look at those lines, we're actually better than budget by a sizable amount in those salary lines. as you can see in the second column, the June forecast variance, we're 289,000 better than budget on the teacher salaries and 89,000 on all other salaries. It's just not as good as it was last month. And so Ken is trying to get underneath what's going on there. He thinks this may be the worst case, and the types of things he has to look at are line by line what happened. Also, did we get the right monies into the right grants, right? Because we do have a lot of grant accounts that roll through, and he's working through that, and we have to make sure that's all straight. And but that's been the biggest surprise month to month. It's giving, I'll be frank, it's really giving Mr. Post a little agita, because he's always called this number very well. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Mr. Post should remember that 88,000 is 1/1000 of the percentage.
Yes, it's a very small percentage of the overall budget. So, but it's enough that it becomes a problematic when you're trying to land the budget right on the dot at the end of the year. The other is substitutes have continued to be an issue. At our finance committee meeting, we launched a major study on understanding the root causes of substitutes and what's causing it. We believe, when we do track, by the way, exactly what was the cause of the substitute. So why is someone absent that they needed a substitute? And there's a lot of reasons to have substitutes, right? It might be the obvious one is sickness, right? You know, if you have a teacher who's ill, especially this last year, we've been saying, if you're feeling sick, do not come to work, right? We don't want to have any COVID risks. But there's other things like, you know, I need to take some time to go to do a PPT, right, with a special ed student or something like that, is another common one. So we're going to go just dig underneath what's going on and see what policies and procedures we need to change, because this year we've overrun our substitute budget fairly well, a lot more than I would have ever expected.
I thought that we had a service or like a contract that was
We do.
supposed to stabilize that a bit more from previous.
We've had a lot more
Good usage.
Yeah, we've had a lot more usage. We've actually, at the beginning of the year, we thought we weren't going to be able to get substitutes because there's a labor shortage. But we've had the contractor has been doing a good job of actually getting us the substitutes, which actually helps run the schools well. But we need to understand our practices. Is it us scheduling? Is it something that is a habit thing that we need to go after? So we kick that off with the principals on Tuesday, and the first order of business is get under the facts, right? Really go dig under that. This is an area that Mr. Post has been worried about. Every month, if you go through that, risks, and the substitutes has always been one of his risk areas, and because he's been seeing it overrun every month. Most of the other items are coming in better than we expected. We actually had not booked all of the possible savings to make our budget in the freezes. We always knew we had a little headroom there, right? But you can see all those other items are actually better than we were last month. So what's going on tonight's informational. I'm not asking you all for anything. We need to finish some of this work. We need to finish the bookkeeping. I still have $150,000 of open POs that haven't all gotten final bills in yet, so they're encumbered at this point. So that's all of the process of closing the books. In the next 2 weeks, a lot of that will start landing, and a lot of the analysis will be done. Ken thinks this 90,000 exposure that we're looking at now, which is less than the COVID and all the risks that we had in this budget. But he thinks it's the high end of the range, is what he reported to us. So we're trying to work it down to as small a number as we can, and I've told them we have to be ready by the the week of the 22nd, that week, to submit something to the Board of Selectmen, because we do understand the process is this contingency relief that we would ask for would be go through the Board of Selectmen first and then come to you as part of the process of closing books. But we want to make sure we get this as small as we can. So my purpose tonight was just to, as I've been doing every month, give you an update on where we are. It's not been great news as we've been going through the closing, and I admit that and understand that. But it's in the salary lines, which is worrisome.
Yeah. So I have some questions on that. You might know the answer to how it works, but I do have some questions. The May forecast, that's a big jump on it.
It is a big jump.
Especially late in the year.
Yes.
So the May forecast is based upon actuals through when? Are you closing every month and looking back to actuals through March, or how does it work?
So let me talk specifically about the salary. Salary lines, especially teacher salaries, is extraordinarily predictable.
Right.
Right? It's, there's not a lot of
That's
things
right.
other than what you pay them, right? Ken thinks some of this may be payments on termination, right? You know, things like they call it the sick bank,
Mm-hmm.
right? They get a payout of any unused sick days up to a cap and a relatively low rate per day. So that's what he has to get under. But he goes through every person on that, understands the gives and the takes all year long. Every month he gets a report from his HR team on here's where we are, and he knows the salary for each individual, and he does P times Q every month. Then he reconciles it to the payroll for the prior month. I don't know if it's back a full month or just we're real time.
Right, I got it.
But he's always reconciling that. So, and he's very proud of being able to call the salary line. There's other lines that are much harder to predict, right? You know, the electric bill, the fuel top-ups. You know, some of those are a little harder because it's all about usage, right? But salary should be dead nuts. So, this is something we're spending a lot of energy on.
Okay.
But he is really on top of this usually.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing your job, I'm just curious.
No, I agree with you. This is one where he does do all of that work you would expect him to do. As I told him after I reviewed what he does, I actually sat with him. I said, man, if I, in my job where I did do financial planning, that's exactly what I would have done.
Right.
There's not, it was, this should be P times Q.
Yep.
Bob, do you know how many people left, how many teachers left this year?
I don't know the final number off the
What are
top
we
of my
talking,
head.
10, talking 20?
It's in the 10 to 20 range. It's in the 10 to 20. We always have some number of retirements. COVID has bumped up retirements over the last couple of years. But we don't, I think he told me we have like 10 to 15 new staff coming in. And we're getting great people, by the way. We're in the process right now of doing all those interviews. We're getting really good people. People want to come to Brookfield.
So potentially, I know this is this budget year, but if we do have sick time payouts and we have PTO, we could recognize some savings in the back end of next year, lower salaries, right?
And we actually book a $200,000 line item in the budget each year for the savings for rotation. And you'll see that in our budget lines, which is a minus 200. It's the weirdest budget line ever.
Yep.
But that was one of the agreements that we had, is we'll take the risk in our budget that in fact we'll achieve that. You guys would have the contingency in the aggregate to if that didn't happen. But we've made that number every year since we started.
Yep.
So, and we made it, more than made it this year.
Any questions?
So again, this is a August type timeline for going to Board of Selectmen and us? or-
My intent would be to hit the Board of Selectmen August meeting, right, with a request. But it's not completely booked and done yet. We'll have to decide, do we go in with a bigger number and then adjust as we go? I have to make sure the Board of Selectmen understands what's going on here as well, so. But, it's all part of us closing the books for the year, because fiscally, we need to make sure we all match the budget. So, and I think in the aggregate, we're okay, right? It's just a matter of trying to get these things landed.
Has the closing process improved over the last several years?
Oh, yeah. On both sides of, of town hall, the closing process works really well, I think.
And there's a report that's due, electronic financial statement, I think it's called, now instead of EDO 01, that's due to the state, where the books have to be closed and finalized by the Board of Ed, and it's due September 1st.
Yeah, I think we have to finalize mid-August, and then the final deadline is the first week of September.
So if he can get you that number in July, that'd be pretty early.
So managing it, it's I hoped it would have been a chunk of money would have gone, that contingency would have gone right back to the fund balance, but it's not perfect. So
Still, yeah. I mean, it is what it is, and thankfully there's some offsets, but it is a big swing month to month.
It is.
don't quite understand, I'm sure you're gonna get it.
As soon as I
No
get
doubt
it,
you're
as
gonna
soon
do
as and what I'll do is if you guys are okay, real time, I'll send updates to you all on what we're learning as we're doing. Because Ken is talking to Mrs. Fernandez, who's the head of our finance committee, and myself as the chairman of the board almost every day. So, and we do appreciate all the support you guys give us, so thank you. And we try to do our best to make sure we're doing what we have to do.
Okay. Mary, any questions? Eileen?
I think the only other piece that I kind of mentioned that I'm sure everybody's thinking about is just if any of these items are going to be impacting next year's budget that were foreseen, or the budget was approved based on numbers without these variances, that we just have an eye on whether
I think that's a good thought.
issue.
The other thing I'll just update you on, let me just, if there's any other questions.
Brianna?
No, I'm okay.
Ryan? Dan?
I do, so it seems like the majority of this is COVID, right? I mean, if you look at 88,000, 95,000 with the overrun. Is there any grants or anything like that still available for COVID relief we can submit for? Marcia, do you know?
So together with the Board of Ed, we submitted a grant. We're submitting for a vaccine reimbursement. A lot of that won't go to the general fund because we were anticipating getting it reimbursed, so it's in a separate fund. But we did spend many, many hours on a reopening grant, and it's $630,000 that we requested, 100% reimbursement. You know they're going to cut that down, and just from the list of 5 pages of questions, we know they're going to cut that down. But a lot of that is stuff that hadn't been reimbursed by the it's not been reimbursed by any other grant. And I would say of the 630,000, 400,000 is Board of Ed and 130 is town.
And that, I think, includes a lot of the 95,000 overrun this last year. I mean, a lot of it was isolation room monitors, contact tracing at the beginning of the year, right, was a big expense for us. You know, they're very COVID-centric.
And the substitutes are very much COVID, but they wouldn't let us, we already didn't put those in, so we know that, so this is in without that, so. Thank you.
The other item I will update you all on is the process for negotiating the teacher's contract. It's a 3-year contract, has now been kicked off.
I'm going, sorry, I'm listening to that, I was saying,
Sorry.
she couldn't go to it, she's
Yeah.
saying, because usually you invite someone to us.
Right. Yeah, I did send a request for it.
I'm sorry, yeah, and I meant to reply, I think I wasn't available, but I checked the dates, and I think only one of the dates actually works for me.
So let me just give you a highlight. So the process is that you set your schedule. It's required. There's a certain window that you have to negotiate a contract, and every school district does it every 3 years with the teachers, because of course teachers is the single biggest item in the budget, right, across the entire town, that process is in a window of time. And the window of time is that we have to actually do negotiations now. It's been kicked off. I have to finish by the end of August, and if we haven't reached agreement by the end of August, it goes to mediation. I think the mediation date is the beginning of September. And then if that fails, it would go to a binding arbitration, which we've been kicking off mid-September. It would probably be in an October timeframe. But the state's schedule is all to get these done before the budget season starts, so we all have some knowledge of what's coming.
Before you go, I'd like to interrupt. One thing about binding arbitration, which you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the town says, or the BOE says 0%, and the teachers union say 10%. They don't find a middle ground. They decide one or the other.
That's exactly correct.
And I'm not saying someone's asking for 10 or you're asking for 0, but as an example, it's not like, gee, we choose the middle.
That's exactly right. They don't split the baby. They take yours or his. This one or this one, and they do it topic by topic. So you also have to decide what topics are going to
Right. So we really don't want to get to that stage because the fate's decided in someone else's hands.
We've been to arbitration multiple times. We have never actually. We've usually had what they call a directed stipulation, which is on the courthouse steps, you make a final agreement, and then it becomes an arbitration award, but it was agreed to by the parties. So we've had that in the past. But in any case, that process is starting. We welcome, we are required to request somebody from the Board of Finance. You all don't have to send somebody, but even if you don't send somebody, I'd love to have a contact that I could be talking on and off with, because here's my worry. With inflation the way it is, this is going to be, and we've already seen signals from other districts, it's going to be big asks on salary increases, and some of the awards we're seeing in some of the districts have been higher than we've seen historically in Brookfield. And so it's a big deal for us budget-wise, and I just think that it behooves the Board of Finance to stay involved, even if you can't attend each meeting. Because I do think it's important to understand how that worked and what discussions were had, and participate in terms of, okay, we'll draw a hard line here, we're willing to go to arbitration over that matter or not that matter, and that is, it's important to the town.
Does
And
the
so-
result on the teacher negotiation then set brackets for what can be expected on all the other union negotiations?
Not generally.
Doesn't drive it?
Not generally, and we've just completed secretaries and nurses. Paras are underway. The administrators were finished earlier in the year, so this is the last of our big ones.
Everybody's on the same 3-year cycle?
No, they're all staggered over, they're staggered. Sometimes you do a 4-year deal, sometimes you do a 2-year deal, depending on what's going on, and we try to do 3 years because it does cost money to, have the right lawyer and, the negotiators. And arbitration, the other reason you don't want to go to arbitration, that's the most expensive piece of the process if you end up going down that path, because you have to pay the 3 arbitrators, right, to come meet. And the way it works is you get one selected by the town, one selected by the union, and one independent arbitrator selected by the state. And so, but you end up paying 3 arbitrators, right? Even if you go settle on the steps of the courthouse. So it's a process. It's underway, right? It's going to be very real time in between now and the end of September. And this will alert you all to the fact that you probably want to stay involved, even if it's not attending the meetings.
Go ahead, Amy.
3 of those 5 dates I'm not in town.
Okay, so does anyone?
I think, which one, so you're not, I think the only one I might not be here for is the 14th. Okay, yeah, I'm not here next week, I'm not here the 15th of August.
Do you anyone oppose those two?
The one next week's not a big deal.
Okay.
And the way the negotiations work, the first negotiation meeting is just presenting to each other what the asks are.
Okay.
So you get a document and they walk through what the document says, but you're not negotiating. That comes in the second and the third one.
So we leave it in your 2 hands and you
Sure.
decide how to handle it?
Okay.
That would be great.
Yeah, between
Alright.
the 2 of us, we can follow.
That's okay with you, Bob?
That was perfectly fine.
Okay,
So
good.
just forwarded him to you.
Okay, and I will let the schedulers know in case there's any
Okay.
changes and stuff to include both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Marcia, guess where we're at now?
Right, the fun part. That, just looking at the current year, we're, for revenue, we're estimating a budget surplus that we were thinking at budget time back in February that it would be about 900,000. We're thinking now that it might be closer to 1.6 million. You have the actual budget to actual. We're not that much different than we were in May. And the budget to actual kind of shows what was it that changed in each of those. When we kind of were talking about one-time revenues, and this I just cut from February, so it doesn't have all the latest and greatest, but we knew we were going to have some surpluses to help us cover with the one-time revenue. We anticipated that. That's this orange box here. So although it's a surplus, it's still anticipated, that if that makes sense. And then we've had some additional costs, like 96,000 for the walls, things like that will eat into this a little bit. And so we just need some time to get that updated. We'll take a look at this again of where we stand, so we have some comfort. That the only big revenue number that we have out there that we don't have we don't know is if Kerma will declare a rebate that sometimes is in the range of $50,000. They haven't had their meeting yet, so we're just waiting for that. But government revenues are really, really easy to predict. So we are done there. There's a few accruals. Some is in the budget actual report. The biggest one is with taxes, that the way we book the taxes on a modified accrual basis is essentially a cash basis from September to August. And last August, we had really, really good collections because the timing of when we sent people to tax sale, that it was delayed because of COVID. And so we had great collections there. So what I've done in the estimates is subtracted out the extra amount that we collected last year. So that's those are the minor things that are still out there that we've got to look at as far as revenue goes. All right, expenditures that I really wanted to ignore this, but Mr. Post gave you estimates, so I'm going to give you some estimates of, and just so you know what we're thinking right now, that there were no significant changes from last month, there were no surprises, that we're estimating we're going to be under budget, and we can only be under budget, so we're estimating we're going to be under budget in payroll and payroll taxes. The gross pay that we were calculating today, there's an error, so we can't post it, so I didn't have the exact number. But it's about $400,000 of payroll for the period that's going to go a little bit to last year and a little bit to next year. About 40% goes to last year if we do it based on the number of days, but we do it the actual amount per day. So if there were a lot of police overtime in June and not a lot in July, it's going to skew that. But let's say it's 40% because there were 4 of the work days were last year and 6 of the work days were this year. That'd be about $176,000 in salaries and taxes. We have about $240,000 in the balance in the payroll budget, so that's how I'm estimating that we may be about $64,000 under budget in payroll. That when I look at the non-payroll, that
Hold on a minute. You're saying it's 400,000.
400,000 is the 2-week period.
Right. Then you have the 160 plus 16.
Is what would be in June.
Then the 240, that doesn't add to 400. It's not
The
supposed to add.
240 is the balance that we have when I take all the payroll lines and I total them up. That I've got a budget because this hasn't been posted yet.
Right.
I have 240 that I'm going to post that 160 and 16 against. So I have a surplus right now in payroll of 240.
Right.
I'm going to post 160 against it, which leaves me 80. I'm going to post 16 against it for payroll taxes. That's how I get to the 60.
So it's coincidence that 160 plus 240.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you go.
Coincidence.
Gotcha.
Yes.
I was like,
Yeah. And this is, I'm estimating, this is, Glenn always says, well, what's your off-the-cuff estimate? And I don't do anything off the cuff. And if my cuff is wrong, I'll tell you why it's wrong. This is what I'm thinking. And then non-payroll, we have $128,000 that we didn't spend in contingency, and that's where we would probably get any Board of Ed stuff from. So that line itself is $128,000. When I look at all the other non-payroll accounts and I add them up, there's about $175,000, and there's about 157 other accounts. They all have to come in under budget, so every account is coming in under budget. It adds up pretty fast. There's as far as what would be out there that's a big under budget, There's some stuff in, I would say $20,000. We thought we would have to put in heart and hypertension. We didn't have to. There's $10,000 that we saved from refinancing. There's some in police, but they've got that negative contingency, so we knew that was going to happen. But everything else is just minor items that are under budget. When I look at, and that's under budget, when I look at what's actually been spent plus the purchase orders. Now, some of those purchase orders, they'll be closing those out, that they'll say, oh, I needed X number of dollars for $10,000 for legal fees. Oh, the legal fee came in and it's only $5,500. We'll close that out and that'll give us $4,500 more in the budget. There's nothing, and that's just a guess, that there's always something, I don't know what's out there that wasn't a scientific amount. And so that's how I'm thinking that we might be $350,000 under budget in the non-payroll expenditures. That's the 128, the 175, and the 50 added together. That I don't see anything. I would be very surprised if there's something that's going to be adding, like an accrual, like a bill that comes in that we don't know about, because it should have all been in the purchase order system. So that would be a failure in our system. But it'll all be refined. I just wanted to give you an idea, the best idea I have as of 6:30 this afternoon, that it'll all be refined when we do the final payroll posting. We get that error solved, we can get that done, and we do the final purchase order closeouts. And we hope to be doing that in July, and then we'll be balancing in August. Any questions on that? We talked last time about the cutoff between the years, that that's where we're in the middle of. We are right in this section here in July, trying to get all the invoices in and closing those out. And audit update, and nothing has happened since we talked last month. And we can see the auditors are out there getting confirmations. A few banks have called us up and made copies for us or whatever. So no changes there. 2022-23 update, everything here we've talked about before. The revenue, we lost a state grant for 206. Interest is going great. That we made the same amount of interest, I think, in May and June as we made the prior 10 months. And it's supposed to just keep going up. So we budgeted $96,000. That's about what we made in the last 2 months. So we should be able to offset some of the money with the loss of the grant. We talked about the potential for FEMA funding for IDA, vaccines, and reopening. As far as expenditures, the health insurance, we know it's higher than budgeted. The $135,000 is the town and Board of Ed number combined. Fuel and gas are still an issue. We don't want to lock in now. We hope it's at the top. But we keep checking with the suppliers to say, what are the thoughts, what are the outlooks. We're seeing surcharges being added by vendors that for fuel mostly. There's some concerns. Doc Sullivan is retiring and he's a part-time health director. There's some concerns there to get an equivalent part-time health director. The School Security Task Force, that's out there, just looming out there as a potential. With respect to the capital budget, we've talked, and all of these, if they were new, I'd put them in red. We've talked about the asphalt, that right now we're all right, but asphalt is based on fuel prices, oil prices. The wall, we added $96,000 for the walls, 3 walls. We added $96,000. And then the locker room, I guess this isn't, I should put that in red. The budget was $1.3 million, the $1,322,000. The low bid was $1,372,000. It's better than we thought. Last month we thought it was $256,000. There's some additions there. I don't know enough about the wall and, the locker room and what we did have, what we have now that, but I'm sure Board of Ed Facilities could come and talk to us about that. But that's where we stand on the budget, that,
So then addressing this, you're $1 million down on the top side. What are the offsetting, where are you gonna get that? You're $1 million down because 206 loss in revenue, 96, 135. The revenue from FEMA, I don't know what that'll be. What are you thinking that'll be?
you know, we've asked for a
100,000?
lot, but I would say, I would be willing to say that at least 150.
Okay, so the 150 wipes out the health insurance. So that's a wash. We're still looking at 300. Fuel and gas, you know, that's a number that's gonna go up. The PT Health is $60,000 to $100,000 probably. The school security task force, they were looking at 600,000, I believe that number was. So you're $1 million down on the top side.
So 600,000, school security task force, we had talked about 600,000, just an off-the-cuff number for 3 years. So it's 200,000 for this year. We had talked about potentially putting it in Arpa for this year and then phasing it in like we did with some of the Arpa, because we also have the Arpa stuff. So with the health director, we're working on trying to get another part-time health director at the same salaries, that there's an open position, maybe we pay more and reduce money from and make that second position part-time and the health director full-time. There's different options that are there. And the interest is another one, but we would have, you're trying to talk about the bottom line, we're still gonna have some issues with, we have to do it, the budget itself, and we would have to do additional appropriations, and we don't wanna have to do that. Because the revenue is not offsetting, we're talking about.
All I'm saying is, we need a plan. Those are big numbers.
Yes.
We need a plan. We started this budget season now. We need a plan from the Board of Selectmen saying, where are you finding this money? How are you gonna do this all? Because that's not even all the things I don't think that we need to address probably in the long run of things.
I think there'll be more that come up, because we talked about, you know, what is a rough idea with inflation going on the capital projects, what is the rough order of magnitude for that, but we hadn't funded it, we just got the idea, in the Board of Finance, I look at Ryan because he made me do the work.
Also, on the boys' locker room, that number, that's a reduced, what we passed was a full-fledged Cadillac that had everything in it. That number now is less than a Ford.
Yeah, I think
We got to address that as well. I mean, that's a pared-down project now that we're spending more money than we originally appropriated for the big project. We had all the cardiac and had everything. So we need to discuss that before we can move it forward, or the Board of Selectmen needs to discuss that before it even comes to us, because again, we put forth the 1.32 based on 100 items, say. Now it might be 50, I don't know, Bob, either. I don't know the paring down, but my understanding was pretty watered down. That now the number's higher than our.
The first bids on the Cadillac came in so high. Right.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
No, I agree. It's nobody's fault.
It's you had to value engineering.
Right, so it's not really apples to apples. That number sort of looks like we're saying, well, it's only 90,000 above what we approved. It's not truly 90,000 over what we approved.
The scope has changed.
The scope has changed. And it's not saying we're gonna say no, we need to understand the scope better to the number, that's all.
Understand this.
Yeah.
And this is actually moving into we keep talking about it as Board of Ed, this is moving into the MPC's hands at this point. So this is one where we would probably want to get the MPC along with the Board of Ed and the facilities team on the Board of Ed and have a good briefing on what's going on here.
Yeah, and the MBC is discussing it on the 19th. And then the other item that's a potential for the capital budget is if we're going to spend anything for this sewer that was just discussed.
That's another 147 on top of these numbers. That's what I'm saying, that ain't all the numbers.
Yeah.
That we're looking at it as a hurdle.
Yeah.
I mean, just today, there's been 2 or 3 things that have come up that we're saying the Board of Selectmen has to come up and, come bring in things one-off to the board, to us, even if there's a solution of where that one thing is gonna be coming from, is really short-sighted when we know there's gonna be multiple things throughout the year that it'd be difficult to approve. I mean, we're
It's
gonna-
only 60,000,
Right.
Dan.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
only- It's only
Exactly.
60,000.
I mean, clearly we're gonna fund the Board of Ed somehow. It's gonna come from somewhere. But then that can't be used for something else, so.
We need a plan, that's all I'm
Yeah.
trying to say, these are big numbers. We need a plan from the Board of Selectmen saying, how are they gonna address this? This is big numbers.
Correct.
They might be small in the thing, but they add up to a very large number that needs to be addressed.
Correct. Which is why we're keeping the list here.
Yep.
To keep track of everything and keep it all together.
Okay. Anything else?
Just a little bit about bonding, that we've got money out there for bonding, and the concern was, should we bond early before the interest rates start rising? We talked to our financial consultant, and he believes that there's no need to hurry because the market has already anticipated those increases.
Not today, it went up 25 bips today.
But I'll double check with them, but they were expecting it to go up multiple times, and if there's a surprise, that he's gonna come back to us, that we need about a 3-month turnaround time for bonding between getting the statement, the offering statement together and things. But he's thinking that we can expect 3.6 to 3.8%, which is the normal levels, and it's still lower than what we were thinking when we bonded for the school. We were thinking 4 and 5%. So it just reminds us what a wonderful deal we got on this school with 1.55% and 1.84%. That I had a citizen call to say, make sure you bring that up, and to say that in a public meeting. So there it is.
Bring it up every time. Citizen, huh? Citizen, we know?
It was a citizen that wasn't Bob, but used to work for IBM, that had all sorts of questions.
Bob from IBM?
It wasn't me.
It wasn't. But I was thinking, oh, you want to be on our Board of Finance?
Look, if it's an IBMer, let me know and I'll go work on it.
But some of the other things that we're thinking about is that we may know in January if there's if there's a surplus. We've bonded for the whole school, and what if we were $1 million under or $2 million under? That right now it's looking like that they're not willing to commit until it's too late for us for this year. But next year, if we said we were going to bond for $2 million and we had that, so it's not like we don't get to offset it. We could offset it and say, oh, so we don't have to bond as much next year. But I was hoping that maybe this year we could say, oh, instead of bonding the whole thing, we'd bond a little less. We won't need money for the radios until after January 1st. That was my other concern. If they say, oh, we need money in November, would we have money at $6 million in November? We don't want to bond between Thanksgiving and Christmas, just the way the market is. So potentially we bond in October, November, which is our normal cycle. But those are the types of things we're thinking about. That I've got, when I get time to get to it, I've got a cash flow schedule in my mind that I'd like to do every month, so we see what our cash flow is. We have money in 2 different banks. I don't want to be surprised and run out of money in Bank 1, but Bank 2 has given us a higher interest rate. So that'll help in that analysis as well. But just we've never had a cash flow model to help us through the year, and we've been lucky because we've had all this bond money that it hasn't been tight, but we want it to get tighter, so we don't bond more than what we need to bond for. And then I wanted to give you a preliminary status of the Arpa funds. That this is as of June 30th. That we've paid a lot of money to the fire departments. They were good, got in there early, get their money. that we paid the YMCA. They're giving us quarterly reports of how they use it. The first report is due at the end of this month. Paid a little bit for the library. And then the small business grants that we had $200,000 budgeted for that. We spent $116,500. There's still money left over, but the selectmen did vote to close that program and not put it out for a second offering. Greg Dombowski did a wonderful job with that. We had 42 applications, and he made them come in with their firstborn and their fingerprints and their DNA, and there were 6 fraudulent applications in that process that.
So we talked about the last meeting.
Yeah, and there were more that showed up since last meeting.
No, we talked about, that's why we wanted to know some of the information we asked for. The fraud, that's what we had a discussion about.
But the fraud was based on the ones that I've heard about are people that weren't the owners applying for grants. Like one, it was an employee that applied for the grant, didn't tell the employer that they were doing it for that business. It were people that seemed to be unrelated to the businesses that just used the name of a business and falsified the application. And it was people that just weren't in Brookfield at all. Those are the ones that I remember hearing about.
So hypothetically, the number there that you have a surplus of 83.5 looks remarkable like the number that the Board of Ed needs of 88,495. And since most of that was COVID-related expenses of 95,547, why couldn't that money be shifted to cover the Board of Ed shortage based on COVID expenses that Ryan brought up as one of the highlights?
Absolutely could.
Well, we'll let the Board of Selectmen decide on that, but that those numbers are awful close to getting Bob to his goal line without affecting any other.
Contingency ones, right.
And most of your costs were, one of the big ones was COVID related, correct?
It was.
95,547.
Absolutely
And your
was.
deficit's 88,495, and that 83.5 could get you darn close if you could find a few $1,000s in your search. Would be nice.
Which I think we will find it. A couple thousand at least.
It might be a road to drive on.
And then today in the payroll, all the firefighters' stipends, or the ones for center fire, were paid, and Candlewood's going to be paid next week, next pay period, and the EMS. So we don't have to set them all up as employees. They're going to, the contractor's going to pay the EMS personnel, and we'll reimburse them after they certified that they did. Any other questions on any of that?
No, thank you. Thanks, Marcia, for everything.
Thank you.
Audit, Don, you want to add anything?
Nothing new, as far as I know.
Old business, there is none. We already went through Allison and Andrew in the new business. Eileen, I think this is your Brianna's brainchild. All right, so you two are running with it, so go with it.
No, I just wanted us to start thinking about our brainstorming ways that we can, let the townsfolk know what's going on. The Board of Education, for those that are on the school Facebook pages, can see the 3 big takeaways that come out of the Board of Ed meetings, and I think that's a great way to communicate. Obviously, I don't know that we can put stuff on the Board of Ed, on the school pages, but I thought it'd be nice if we make a little more effort to get out, communicating out to the public what goes on in our meetings. I think a lot of people don't know. So just thought I'd put it out there for something for us to figure out if this is something we think would be valuable, where we could put information, whether it's a printed out flyer that gets hung on the library bulletin board, to reach different groups in our town. But I think there's a lot that happens here that people don't know about, and we repeatedly hear this information. And not everybody's on Facebook, so conversations that are had on Facebook don't make it out to everybody, so I just thought if we could find a way to regularly and have a process to get that information out.
Not everybody has YouTube, so not everybody can watch.
Yeah.
It's not just something that's normal for everyone, so way to get out
Yeah.
what happened.
So, but I just wanted to see if there was any, support for that, and then maybe we can start brainstorming, just put some ideas of where we could put communication out.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, helping people help themselves to information is always a good thing, So at some point, it's incumbent upon people to get the information, but making it more readily available is a plus, I think. It's a question of what,
And that,
what
yeah,
and.
if we could decide as a board at the end of our meetings to say, these are the things that we think should be brought out, posted somewhere,
Yeah.
and then where are we gonna post it?
Like highlight, brief blurb,
Yep,
this is what, almost like what went where.
yeah. And there may not always be stuff, we don't always have motions made on things that need to go out, but, to know where, even to post again where to find something, but, I think it could be helpful, because I think we all hear a lot of misinformation, and if we can dispel some rumors.
Yeah. So, as a hypothetical,
Yep.
what do you think would come out of tonight? Good
Yeah,
question.
even the summary, we were, X number of days from closing out the budget, and, with the current projections, there's potentially a savings of, maybe 1.6, and we don't wanna put stuff that could catch us up, right? We don't, it's not.
Yeah, and then, 1.6 million,
Yeah, but we could be more general and say it looks like, we're looking at a budget surplus,
Yeah.
and by this date, we hope to have a final number, and when the books are closed, we
Yeah.
can publish that number.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, and then, some of these things that we're anticipating, or even if it's just that there was a presentation by the WPCA about a potential sewer line through the Fort
Yeah,
Worth district.
so, I read the Board of Ed stuff all the time, and
Yeah.
this is going to sound worse than it is intended. I'm telling you right now. I'm just creeping. It's gonna sound worse than it's intended, but a lot of times it sounds like marketing.
Yeah, yep,
It sounds like,
Yeah.
So I just wanna, we're
Yeah.
a bit more factual, a bit more,
Yeah.
so that, no offense.
No offense taken, it is marketing.
Yeah.
It's part of
Yeah.
community. I'll tell you what, the 3 main points is one of the most popular things that we have.
Yeah.
And you don't actually have to go say, this is the number or
Yeah.
anything like that. You can be there, you can just say, we discussed it, and here's a pointer to where you can see that discussion.
Yeah.
And that, just having here's important things you should know that we talked about, and here's the pointers of how you can go review it if you want. People love that.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit of marketing.
Yeah, no.
Because we do want to tell people.
yeah.
Yep.
So why don't we do it this way? You wanna champion it, I would
Sure.
say, why don't you bring us and work with, whoever wants to work with you, bring us an example for next week. Like, come, like I say, what would you have put in for tonight?
Yep.
And then present it to us, like, this is what I would have put in for last meeting, and then we'll decide at the end of the meeting, as you're taking your notes, what we'll put in.
Yeah.
If there's
And-
something worthy of a post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's not something worthy, we won't, but if there is, like you say, the fire department presentation, see the numbers.
Yeah.
I get that. The WPCA, here's their presentation or their packet, which is up anyway, they can get that. But
Yeah.
just bring their attention to there's something new up even.
The way we organize it in the Board of Ed is we have the last agenda item on the Board of Ed meeting is to
Right.
talk amongst ourselves of what are the 3 main points.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have 2, sometimes we have 4,
Yeah.
but we decide, right, and it's publicly decided.
Yep.
And then we have one of our members who actually drafts it up,
Mhm.
right? And then we have a website that, we have a Facebook that we posted on, that would be, I think, an interesting challenge,
Yeah.
since you don't have a
Right.
Facebook page, where would you actually get it out there? But it's,
But anything
but
posted
I
for
think
Board of Ed, we can post for you.
organizing it, having a brief discussion at the end of a meeting, and then having one member who's kind of the writer, right, gets a single voice, right,
Right.
in the writing. so.
But if it's pertinent to the Board of Ed, couldn't we submit it to you for review, and then you put it on the Board of Ed site to get that information on? If it's pertinent to passing something, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. It could be a no, you could say
Yeah, I
no.
avoid that, I think this should be
All right.
if we're gonna do it, it's
All
our
right.
document, it's our
Sounds good.
document, it's our publishing.
Yeah, I think I
Alright.
agree with that. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. All right, any other thing to come before this board? No public comment.
Matt,
Matt Grimes, 11 Orchard Street. Much of this is in the letter that was covered in your correspondence. I do think, and as I said in the letter, you as a Board of Finance have some very hard choosing to do. I think you need to question Selectman Dunn as to why he kept the situation that the current First Selectman brought out last month from you for 18 months. Keeping it from the Board of Finance, I think, was wrong on every level. I think you need to ask the Board of Selectmen for special counsel so that you understand your role. None of you raised that point of order at your last meeting. The investigation that apparently is going on may violate the charter. I think everybody has told you that. And I think you need to find out if it does or not. And the only way you're going to find out as a board if that happens or not is if you ask the Board of Selectmen for special counsel to help you look into that issue. Because if the investigation does violate the charter, I mean, that's wrong on every level. I don't know how anybody tied a Board of Ethics investigation into any of this stuff, because it seems to me the investigations that have been talked about have nothing to do with the Code of Ethics. And I'm really surprised unpleasantly that absolutely nothing has come out of this board since this issue came up on June 8th. I mean, the silence is horrible, especially considering how vocal you were about the law firm, and rightly so. And as again, there's an active investigation going on, and this board has said nothing, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. And if, in terms of what actually happened in December of 2020, one Board of Finance member told me right after the last meeting that there's 3 sides to every story, and that may be true, but right now we only know one. And that was the one that was reported in the paper and was read by the First Selectman, which is not flattering to your chairman. We're one community and we're one standard, and we don't know, nobody knows what the facts are, they only know the one side of it. Has it been what's reported? Is that true, or is it something else? I'm concerned about the Board of Finance because I think it's a vital component of the town meeting form of government. I mean, we're undergoing a charter revision process, and they need input from you as to how you can help do your jobs better as well. But again, one community, one standard. I think you folks have some hard choosing to do, and I really do hope you weigh in on this before this gets out of hand. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, I appreciate it.
Public comment.
Okay.
Yeah, Harry, you're next.
I will be very brief and very fast for a number of reasons, mainly because I'm starving. But I just want to say, as far as the sewer goes, I was one of the real proponents of waiting for a full board. I felt very uncomfortable making a decision that's been going on for 20 years. It's a critical part of our infrastructure. And I felt very, very, I did not want to do that without a full board. So that's why we held it off. We can have a special meeting tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned, to get this thing rolling so that they can get their things done. And I think that we could possibly also combine that special meeting with, hopefully with Marcia, so that we can address the overspent, the money that we're going to need, not the overspent, but the money that we're going to need. I do have one question. I kind of was wanting Paul to be here. I think that what he said that is that the capacities are 100,000 or 1,000. I didn't know if that was combined for the 9 properties or for each individual property. I think it's for each individual property. And I also thought he said that that manufacturing company in the back had a 3,000 gallon a day output. What are we doing with them? How, if they're going to get a pump with $1,000 max or $1,000 gallon max, what are we doing with them with 3,000? But I'll address that in that. Lastly, here's why you don't want to go to arbitration with the BOE. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of the years
you can't correct you, but go ahead.
one of the years, the arbitrators put into the administration's contract that when you have a new hire as an administrator, so let's say it's $140,000 max for an assistant principal and a $120,000 minimum. At their second year, whatever you hire, let's say you hire them at $125,000, at their second year contract, they have to be within 4% of max.
Yes.
So they would go from, let's say you hired them at max, at minimum, they would have to go from $120,000 the next year to within 4% of $140,000. And that was that was not part of the contract, that was put in by the arbitrators. So we need to be very careful, as Bob said, to not get involved with arbitration, but it can be very costly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. I think, I won't address the comment, but I think we're all set with 2 members of ours covering that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
They'll be involved with this and feed us back the information. And like Eileen has with the Board of Ed all along for the year, I think that's worked out really well for all of us, that we've been involved in things. Eileen looks at things and sort of speaks, from where we stand a little bit, so I think it works. I think the same thing with the negotiation.
I will also say it's a joy having Eileen on our committee. So, she's always productive. And also John Lucas as well joins us.
All right, since there's no other public comment, who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion today.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye. Have a good night.